All right, so I want to show you a little bit about some modeling tools now. If we go up to the Create menu and you make a polygon primitive, I'm going to make a cube up here. Make sure interactive creation is off because otherwise it's kind of an annoying interface to deal with. I just like clicking that. You can also click this shelf button if it suits you. And you'll see that you have your polygonal object in here. This is just a default cube. And what extruding does, and all the modeling tools for that matter, are that they work by affecting the components of this cube. And you'll see if you right click and hold on this object, you'll get a bunch of different selection options. And when it's highlighted green, that means you're in object mode. So you're selecting this whole thing at one time, and if you move it around, you'll see that those values pop into the channel box. Now, if you hold right click and go to verts, you can start selecting these individual points on the mesh. I'm just going to undo that, Control Z. Start moving all of these, and Control Z and Control Z. And you can go into edge mode as well, which is the lines that connect each of these verts to each other. So this works by kind of finding where your verts are, then it connects them with edges, and then it connects those edges together with faces. So that's how Maya kind of comprises every single polygonal object that you'd see in it. It's all made up of these tiny little points to start with, and then builds into something greater. Now, these modeling tools, I said, affect these components of the verts, the edges, the faces. And the first one I'm going to show you is the Extrude tool. Now, Extrude only works on faces and edges, right? So if I go into face mode, make sure you're in face mode or edge mode if you're extruding. Most likely face mode for these first sort of steps. But if you go into Extrude, notice that I have a new UI on here, and you have these little drag around boxes. I'm going to change the local translate Z, and I'm just clicking on that word and dragging. And you'll notice that it kind of just pops that out, and we have new geometry that wasn't there before in the scene now. And I can do the same here. We don't always have to press the button. We can instead press Control E, and then we have that same thing. Now look at these different sort of settings in here. Offset, you can kind of drag around. If it's popping way too much in here, you can hold Control and drag to kind of get a little bit of more variability in there. If you're doing some smaller detail work, if you're doing really small detail work, you can hold Control and Shift and drag that. Look at that bad boy. Oh, it's barely moving at all. But yeah, so you can extrude to kind of taper in these sorts of shapes like this. And I can extrude again with Control E and move it around. Now, a big pitfall of extruding, because you can make some really cool shapes with extrusions, right? A big pitfall is if you extrude, and then I see how I clicked off, I didn't move it at all. And then maybe I forgot about it, maybe I'm modeling something else. But be very very aware of when you're pressing Control E, because Maya didn't forget about those new verts that you made in there, right? So if I drag these out, notice how I had a double set of verts in there. And from just appearances, even in wireframe mode with 4, it doesn't look like anything's wrong with it, right? But on there I have a bunch of verts stacked on top of each other. And a good rule of thumb when you're extruding is to, as soon as you press Control E, either move it or undo it with Control Z. And look down here, notice how it just says undo and then blank. I'm undoing until I see undo poly extrude, just so I know with 100% certainty that it's undoing that. So yeah, so that's extrusion. And you can use extrusion to do a bunch of things. You don't always have to move it around with this. Say if you wanted to extrude and then immediately move it along this way to kind of start diverting that into some sort of like almost pipe shape. You can also do insets with this. So I'm going to extrude in, and I'm just scaling down with my R button. And then I'm pressing Control E again. And if I move this in, you'll see that kind of gives it a little nice little inset in there, kind of into the surface. A little bit of a bevel on this edge, which is pretty nice. And don't confuse that with the actual tool bevel, because there is a tool called bevel in here, and we'll get into that later. But yeah, so that's pretty much extrusion for you. If we have a bunch of different faces, so if I'm going to do this with a sphere. If I move this over here, because sometimes this option can get enabled and cause a little bit of a headache. If I have just a selection like that, and I press Control E, and if I move it out with this, you'll see that they all move away from the face, which is nice, versus me just moving with the regular W tool. It moves it in one direction. So if I move it out like this little option right here, keep faces together, makes this one chunk. All these connected faces in the selection are bound together. However, if I turn that off, notice how it makes all these different extrusions for each of those faces. And this would be useful for like maybe if you're modeling a grenade or like a pineapple or like some sort of grip or something. That's if you're doing some really high poly modeling there. Again, keep it basic when you're in these starting levels. Don't go too wild. But yeah, so that's Extrude for you. Hope it was helpful.